This is called Singled Out. I have CDs and notes, and Amanda and Pat are putting up YouTube videos, so we're literally just making it happen. Singled Out. James chapter 5. Be also patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draws near. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge stands before the door. Take, my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. You have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. Here James tells us, and I was studying this because this is just something that I'm always continually, it seems, drawn to. James is telling us that the suffering of the prophets was an example to us. How many saw that? How many tried to just kind of ignore that? How many don't want that to be true? King James used the word patience with suffering, that we're called to suffer with patience. How many suffer with patience? The word patience literally translates long-suffering or longanimity. Long-suffering or longanimity. How many find that you like the idea of short suffering much more than the idea of long-suffering? The word longanimity translates to endure hardships and injuries or offense. Longanimity is actually a word that comes from a combination of two Latin words, longus, which is long, and animus, which means soul, to have a long soul, which is really interesting. A long soul is a soul that has been trained to remain and endure. That's really good, huh? Look at verse 8 again. Be patient and establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draws near. Establish your hearts. Sterizo, establish, it's Greek. Sterizo means stabilize. Steadfastly set your heart in one direction. Stabilize your heart. To establish is to be resolute. It's to be determined, unwavering in your feelings. How many are like professionals at being unwavering in your feelings? We don't have any professionals here today. At least we have truthful people. Look what David wrote in Psalm 131. Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty. Neither do I exercise myself in great matters or in things too high for me. How many understand that there are things that are too high for you? And there are things that you shouldn't even consider. How many ever question God's ways? David said there's things that I shouldn't even consider. They're too high for me to understand. Even if he gave me an answer, could I understand what he was talking about? Yeah. David said there's things that are, my heart's not high. He said, my eyes aren't lofty. There are things that are too high for me to consider. It's arrogant to believe that the ways of God would make sense to me. Isn't it? That God can explain something to me having to do with His ways and that I can just get it. Oh, okay, God, you're fine. Then go ahead. I give you permission. Right? We always have, don't Christians always have to have an answer? Wonder why that happened? Well, I believe the Lord told me. How many have ever done that? Why I believe the Lord told me is because I'm an idiot. That's what happened. That's my fallback. I always say this. Why did that happen? Because I'm an idiot. God knows it. I know it. We're in agreement. Remember in Luke chapter 18, in the parable of the Pharisee and the publican, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Jesus said that the religious man considered his quote-unquote, air quote, good life behavior to be a source of confidence between himself and God. He thought because he had done all these good things, it gave him a platform of confidence to stand on in front of God. This is what is known as lifting up the eyes. This is known as lifting. This way declares, I deserve the reward without saying it. The lifting up of the eyes says, it literally says, without me speaking it, it says, I deserve to receive from God. I deserve reward. It doesn't say it, but that's what the way is. Lifting up the eyes. The lofty eyes declare, I have made myself worthy. Remember that Jesus said that the publican wouldn't even lift up his eyes to heaven. He's humble and he's broken and he's without demands. This is what David was saying. David said, I refuse to speculate. How many know everything doesn't have to make sense? How many know that? I never ask the hard questions. Wonder why this is like that. Wonder why God allowed that. I never ask that. Literally, I'm afraid to ask those questions. Like, how arrogant am I that I would demand to know that? I wonder why. I don't even have a right to wonder. David said that. He said, my heart, my eyes, my me, I just bow it down. I keep my eyes on the ground. Whatever happens, I just say, hey, thy will be done. I don't get it, thy will be done. The publican is broken and he's humble and he's without demands. To speculate. I refuse to speculate because to speculate is to engage and to indulge in thought without evidence. How many have ever accused somebody of something in your mind? And you had no evidence, but you knew that they were guilty. Right? We didn't speculate about why God. Isn't it ridiculous to speculate why God did what he did or God allowed to happen what happened? Isn't it ridiculous that I could even speculate, like I could even fathom the thoughts of God? How lofty is that? How arrogant. David said, the ways of God are beyond me, and it would be arrogant to even speculate. When the natural man speculates, he will many times begin his sentences with, this is what I think. You know what I think? How many have ever heard somebody say that? How many have ever said that? You know what I think? That's the natural man's way of speculating. He's giving you his belief system. Whatever it is, it's in the natural realm. This is what I think. This is what I think. This is what I think about politics. That's why I don't talk about politics. Politics is the religion of the world. Did you ever notice that? The religion of the world is politics. Stay away from it. Doesn't concern you. You know what I think? Doesn't matter what you think. You know what I speculate about this? Don't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter. It's just something that you believe, something that you think. When a Christian speculates, though, he will many times begin a sentence as, well, this is the way I believe. Anytime somebody says that to me, I shut them off immediately. Well, this is what I believe. Don't care. Doesn't matter what you believe. Matters what God believes. Matters what God thinks. And if I don't know that way of God, like I'm going to take your opinion. Right? Well, we're not sure why God does this, but this is what I believe. Whoa, speak, oh mighty wisdom. How many know that this is what I believe or this is what I think? Literally both come from a proud heart. Come from a heart that is proud, and David said, lofty. Look what he said next in Psalm 131, verse 2. Surely I have behaved and quieted myself as a child that is weaned of his mother. My soul is even as a weaned child. I love this scripture because I want to be this. My soul is even as a weaned child. The cry is of a nursing baby. How many have ever heard the cry of a nursing baby? Right? You know what the demand is? More. Right? Doesn't know anything else, does it? Wants more. Cries. What's the mother do? Fills that baby's mouth. How How do you understand that babies don't suffer well? It's the truth. As soon as their little belly starts to grow, I got a new little granddaughter. She's about to, and boy, as soon as she's out, she is good. She's literally the best baby in the world that I've ever seen. Lays there just happy every time she sees me. She's nothing but, toothless smile. Why don't they make baby dentures? They would look so much more natural. Look like little tiny old people. And she just lays there, just as happy as a child. But as soon as she's hungry, boy, it's time. We've got to turn the siren on. Everybody's going to know why. They're immature, right? They don't suffer well. Nobody who asks, how is your baby doing, ever gets answered with the word, my baby is the most long-suffering child I have ever seen. How do you understand long-suffering is not an adjective we use for babies? Is it true? This is the most patient baby I've ever been around. David uses the word shaya, which King James chose to use the word behave. I have behaved, shaya. It's Hebrew. So King James went, we're not sure what that is, so let's use the word behave. Behave. Shaya is to counterbalance or to oppose with an equal weight or force. It means to counterbalance or oppose. I have behaved. I have counterbalanced. I have opposed with an equal weight or an equal force. How many understand that no soul is born patient? You are not patient from the beginning. My soul must be trained by opposition. I must oppose my soul. How many find it much easier to give in to your soul? Right? My soul starts whining and crying a little bit. Just give it. It's easier. David's counterbalance was to quiet his self-side. Quiet it. You know what the word quiet means? To wait in silence. Quieting myself. I have opposed that part of my soul by forcing it. Forcing it to wait in silence. If you looked at yourself, how many could probably truthfully say, you don't have to raise your hand. I'd rather than 10. But how many could look at your soul and say, I have a spoiled brat for a soul? It's selfish and demanding. It's ill-mannered and annoying. It's proud and entitled. My soul. Why? Because and you tell me, because I wait on it. I'm hungry. Here, eat. Right? How many understand that it's easy to notice these things in others? Wow, you are such a baby. Right? How many look at people and go, wow, you are so immature. At least in your mind you think that when you're talking to them. I was working with a guy this week, giving me a hard time. I'm like, let's just do the job. We're all working together. The boss gave me I'm the longest guy. I've been there for 35 years or some ridiculous amount of time. Since 1986. I don't even know how long ago that. And so, I'm the oldest guy on the crew, at least the longest guy on the crew. And so he gives me a crew. Judah's one of them. Judah's a joy to work with. Anything I tell you, okay? No problem. Carry that giant tree over there. Okay, God. Can't do anything. Not even get grin the whole time. But this other fella, and usually he's a good mood, but after the job starts running along, he starts getting his inner child begins to expose itself. And it just really just becomes grumpy, mad. So I called Charlie and I said, you got to give this man a different scenery. Take him to another job. Give me anybody or nobody. Just please, just take him to another. So he got to work that day and I said, hey, Charlie wants you to go help one another. He almost yelled, yippee. Woo! He's cool, man. He's happy. I couldn't believe it. And instantly, his inner child was like, we're going to the park. Woo! You know? You ever get like that? Your inner child gets mopey and cry. Then you get your own way and it's like, yes! Right? You ever been there? Ever work with that? Look what Jesus said in Luke 21. And a city unto them, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilence. Fearful sights, great signs shall there be from heaven. But before all these things, they'll lay their hands on you, persecute you, deliver you to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And it shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your heart, not to meditate before what you'll answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries won't be able to gainsay or resist. And you shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kinfolk, friends, and some of you they'll cause to be put to death. And you shall be hated of all for my name's sake. But there shall not a hair of your head perish. In your patience, possess ye your souls. This is why I didn't answer you, because I'm going to tell you one of the answers. Scotty asked me a question this week, and I didn't answer it. But this is the real other reason. It's sometimes difficult to understand what Jesus was saying when this is all translated into English. How many know that this isn't how Jesus said it? If he would have said it, you would go, what's he saying? How many understand Greek? It's all Greek to you. So Jesus was speaking in the Greek language when he said this. And so whatever he said, it didn't sound like what I'm saying to you. But we've translated it into English many times. And so in verse 16, he says that some will be put to death. Didn't he say that? Some of you are going to be put to death. And then in verse 18 it says, there shall not a hair of your head perish. How many went like this when you read that? Some of you will die, but not a hair of your head will perish. Does that sound like, two different things? Right beside this verse in my Bible, I have a study Bible, and right beside this verse it says, divine protection. Some of you will die, divine protection. How many understand that everyone that heard Jesus say these words are dead? Right? They were all sitting there, weren't they? Sitting there listening to him, and not a hair of your head will perish. And they went, wow, I'm privileged. It's going to take care of me. Jesus said, when he said that, there shall not a hair of your head perish, it literally has to do with everything that happens by permission of the Father. That's literally the translation. Everything that happens to you is going to happen by permission of the Father. That's what it meant. I don't know where King James goes, and there will not a hair of your head perish. Literally, if you go to the Greek and you study deeply, it literally translates, there will nothing come into your life. How many trust God? There will be nothing. How many know that means it's nothing? Amen. That can come into your life except by permission of the Father.
Yeah, amen.
That's the key. Nothing without permission of the Father. You think back to all the things that you've suffered through and struggled through, nothing has come except by permission of the Father. Nothing. We spend a lot of time and money in the diligent attempt to avoid suffering. Is it true?
Yeah.
Diligently. We don't want to suffer, so we spend a lot of time and money trying to avoid it. But remember, James said that the most blessed people, he called it happy. It's not what it meant. Happy is the word blessed. It means to be envied. the most blessed, the most envied people are those who endure suffering. Is that what he said? Yeah. How many understand he didn't say the most blessed people are those who escape suffering? How many wish you would have? Right? How many remember John 14 where Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments. How many always heard that the commandment of Jesus, in fact, I think we sing the song, the Christmas song, and his law is love, his gospel is peace. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Remember? The commandment of Jesus was what? To love one another. How many have always heard that preached and know that that's true? He said, love one another. This is my commandment that you what? Love one another as I have loved you. But Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. So how many know there's got to be more than one? If you love me, keep my commandments. Now, I've searched for years, but I've not found any others. Not real commandments from Jesus. There's a few that are kind of vague. But we know that love one another is one. But what else? So here in Luke 21, there's another commandment of Jesus. In your patience, long-suffering, possess your souls. You know what he's saying? In your long-suffering, control your child. Possess your soul. That's what he said. It's not like he's saying, in your patience, you're going to possess your souls. How many thought that's what it meant? I did. I always read that. In your patience, you possess your soul. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying, while you're suffering, control your child. Possess your soul. That's a commandment of Jesus. It literally means, while you're suffering, take ownership of your thoughts, take ownership of your will, and take ownership of your emotions. That's your responsibility as someone who says, I trust God. In the midst of suffering, take ownership of your soul. How many have ever been owned by your soul? How many have ever been owned by fear? Or doubt, or insecurity? How many have ever been owned by depression, or loneliness, or discouragement? Have you ever been owned by anger, or bitterness, or jealousy, or any multitude of emotionally destabilizing feelings? These all have to do with your soul not being possessed by you. These all have to do with your soul owning your life, possessing your life. How many have ever felt your soul out of control? You've been angry or something, worried. How many have ever been so worried you couldn't sleep? That's your soul owning you. In your long suffering, possess your soul. It's a commandment of Jesus. While you're in the midst of suffering long, keep your child under control. 1 Corinthians 13:4. Yes. Charity suffers long and is kind. Charity envies not, charity vaunts not itself, and is not puffed up. How many have ever had a child that you were raising that got miserable when they were tired? My wife raised her hand. She's probably talking about me. How many know that that child can become literally emotionally inconsolable? Is it true? A child can become inconsolable. Sometimes Journey will get so tired, at the end of the day, she'll just start sobbing. It's just for no reason. She's a girl. Let me ask you this question. How many have ever seen a hangry child? I'm not talking angry, I mean hangry. How many have ever seen a hangry child? They get crying so hard that they almost can't even quit when you put a bottle in their mouth. Have you ever seen a baby going and you put the bottle in, they can't even suck because they're crying so hard? How many have ever seen that? They're hangry. How many know hangry is a real word in the dictionary? soul is taking me over. I cannot control my tongue. Hangry. How many have never really grown out of the stage of hangry? Kids used to sit around and they're all little, and they'd all be mad on Sundays after church because they're so hungry. And I'd say, remember, children, we're Christians. Let's pretend that we are. Paul says that love suffers long, doesn't it? And then he says, and is what? Wow, huh? I don't even like that verse. Let's tear it out, right? The word kind is gracious. How many understand that when you're suffering, it's much easier to be bitter or irritated? How many have ever suffered long and you've had enough? Right? But the call is to suffer graciously. Gracious. Look what Jesus said in Matthew 24. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to be afflicted, they'll kill you. You'll be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, shall hate one another. And many false prophets will rise and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many will wax cold. But he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. He that shall endure to the end. Jesus said that the season of affliction is coming. How many can see the world changing rapidly? Right? It's kind of scary, right? I mean, it's cool, but it's kind of like unnerving too. The season of affliction is coming, and I believe it's upon us. Men are going to lie about you. And you know what's weird? People are going to believe them. Jesus said that. They're going to lie about you, and people are going to believe them. Their arguments about you will be so convincing that even your friends and family won't know what to think. He said that. Even the people who know you best will begin to question you because their lies about you are convincing. Yeah. You will be mocked and ridiculed and hated. Jesus said that because of this widespread persecution, multitudes are going to be offended. Remember, what's the only cause of offense? Do we remember? There's only one thing that causes offense. Pride. Very good. That girl in the back line. The only thing that causes offense in my life is pride. Me defending me. Right? How many want to be seen as pure and holy and righteous and good? So you defend you, don't you? Somebody says something and it's wrong. You know it's wrong. So you defend you. How many know when you defend you sound guilty as if you don't defend you? But the only thing is there's no reward in defending you. It's only not defending yourself. Look what Jesus said here in verse 13. He that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. The word endure is the word hupomeno. You know what it literally means? Remain in an inferior position. Hupo is always under. To remain in an inferior position. How many don't like to look stupid? He says, even if they make you look stupid, just stay there. They make you look bad, just stay there. They make you look inferior, stay there, remain. Control your child. Control your child. That was the commandment of Jesus. Control, possess your soul. Control your child. You say, I can't control my child. You're a lousy parent. It's not your child's fault. Your child is naturally out of control. Must be trained to be controlled. So same with my soul. My soul. What kind of a parent am I when my soul is out of control? He that shall endure to the end. Remain in an inferior position. Look what Jesus taught in Matthew 5. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you, persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice! That's way tough one, isn't it? Rejoice! And be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets which were before you. Remember, in the beginning we read how the prophets were persecuted. And they endured. And they were an example to us. When you hear the words persecuted for righteousness' sake, persecuted for righteousness' sake, how many instantly believe that you are suffering because of all your wonderful godlike qualities? Right? When you're persecuted for righteousness, I must be good enough. Remember, God doesn't see your ability to keep all the rules as acceptable righteousness. Remember? We talked about it. God doesn't look at your great ability to keep all the rules as acceptable righteousness. In fact, we talked about this. Isaiah said in chapter 64 that when I hold up my righteousness to God as an offering, he sees it as me offering him filthy rags. And literally the translation is menstrual rags. He sees it as dead blood. It's no blood sacrifice. No living. Isn't that an amazing God? So when I offer my righteousness, I'm holding it up to God. And he goes, oh. In the kingdom, all righteousness has to do with humility. You're blessed when you're persecuted. You're blessed when you're reviled. You're blessed when men say all manner of evil against you falsely. How many know if they say evil against you truly, then you got a problem? But if they're talking about you falsely, you're blessed. Blessed is to be envied. Blessed is literally holy. Blessed literally means chosen. God says blessed is selected. It's by the will of God. You've been selected for this. Isn't that awesome? The only potential for kingdom advancement is through humility. The only potential for kingdom advancement. When God chooses you, he singles you out. He singles you. How many hate to be singled out? How many have ever been singled out in a crowd and despised it? You used to have teachers that would call on you for things like answers. I don't want to answer this. Oh, someone else. Right? God singles you out to be blessed. If I preach this to a lot of people, I'd say, God has singled you out to be blessed. They'd go, glory. Must be a windfall coming. Yeah, trouble. God has singled you out for trouble, for suffering. I don't want to hear that. Can't you call on him? The only potential for kingdom advancement is through humility, and the only potential for humility comes through long suffering. If God singles you out for kingdom advancement, it means that he has singled you out to suffer for the sake of his name. And again, it's not the suffering itself that promotes you. It's whether or not you endure that determines potential promotion. Has nothing to do with the suffering itself. Has everything to do with my response to suffering. Endurance always, 100%. How many want to do over? Don't worry, there's a lot of suffering to go around. God will give you another chance. Endurance always has to do with humility. Endurance always has to do with me humbling myself. When you're accused, will you remain silently hupomeno in an inferior position, or will you defend you? David had an intimate relationship with God during his youth. His great strength and courage came from his closeness with the Lord's presence. In fact, the more the Lord withdraws his presence from us, the more fearful we become. If you are feeling fearful about anything, it's because the Lord's presence is far from you. The closer you get to God, the more giants you will slay. Wow, that's really good. I can write that on my fridge if I had a fridge, but I can't No, sometime in his early 50s, David stayed home from battle. The Bible says that he's restless. And so one evening he ends up walking around on his roof. I imagine he was a roofer. He's a lot like me, checking the roof for leaks, probably had a leak. Just walking around, checking the clay tile. Maybe he was on the left, I don't know. He sees the neighbor lady bathing. Now, if you see the neighbor lady bathing and you're on your roof, the thing that you should never do is invite her over. Just saying. David invites her over. I don't understand him. It worked for him. He's in his 50s, probably a midlife crisis. Sees the neighbor lady bathing, invites her over. She ends up pregnant. It causes a downward spiral of an out-of-control situation. And a continuing downward spiral. David has her husband murdered to cover up his own sin. Nathan the prophet comes to visit David with a message, and he says to David these words. You ready? You got to get this, because this scares me. This scares me right here. These words terrify me. He says to David, God forgives you, but from now on your life it will not be that great. God forgave you, but it's not going to be easy from now on. So the baby that Bathsheba gives birth to dies. Then David's son Amnon rapes David's daughter Tamar. And because of this, David's favorite son Absalom kills his half-brother Amnon, who had raped his full sister Tamar. Then through a series of events, Absalom leads a coup against David, and he takes control of David's kingdom. Sleeps with a dozen or so of David's wives, and he takes over the kingdom. The people are worshiping Absalom. And Absalom is trying to kill his father. How many agree that David's affair with Bathsheba became the gift that just continued to give? Right? Wow, if I could turn back time. Now, David and his loyal troops are fleeing Jerusalem. Is everybody following the story? David and his loyal troops. David's got some guys that are dedicated to death to David. Literally love him. Whatever he's done, they just love this man and they honor him because they know God has placed him in the position he's in. These are men that God has given to David. They're fleeing Jerusalem. At this point, can you imagine how David must feel? As David and his troops are fleeing for their lives, watch what happens next. Look at 2 Samuel 16. I'm almost done, but I want to show you this. And when King David came to Bahurim, behold, there came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. And he came forth and he cursed still as he came, and cast stones at David, and at all the servants of King David. The servants are David's warriors. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And thus said Shimei when he cursed, Come out, thou bloody man, thou man of Belial, you devil, they call him. The Lord has returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead you have reigned. And the Lord has delivered. Now this sounds like the guy's a prophet. The Lord has delivered the kingdom, and it looks like it, doesn't it? Has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, you are taken in your mischief, because you're a bloody man. And then said Abishai, this is my favorite guy, the son of Zeruiah, who is David's sister, unto the king. This is David's nephew, Abishai. Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. I like this man. So at this point in his life, David's like 62 years old. David's 62. He's had this affair almost 12 years ago, right around 12 years ago. David's like 62 years old. And he suffered a lot over the last. How many would say David has suffered a lot? Lost a baby, lost a son, had his daughter raped, lost the kingdom, now to his favorite son who's trying to kill him. Now he's at the lowest point in his entire life. And here comes Shimei. Shimei comes out to harass and to curse David. David's nephew, Abishai, says, "Who does this dead dog think he is? Please, just let me kill him." How many have me in their Abishai? Maybe that's why I relate so well to this story. It's that part of you that immediately rises up to defend and protect you. That part of you that starts swinging with the sword. You just want to kill the accusation and the accuser. How tempting would it be for David to accept Abishai's offer? You've got to put yourself in David's shoes. This is literally, the man's had a really bad 12 years. How many would say he suffered enough? Right? Let me show you something that's awesome. Look what David says in starting verse 10. And the king said, "What have I to do with you and you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse. Because the Lord has said unto him, curse David. Who shall then say, wherefore hast thou done so?" And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, "Behold, my son, which came out of my own bowels, seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite do it? Let him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has bidden him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and the Lord will requite me good for his cursings this day." David said here, the Lord has bidden him. You know what the word bidden means? The Lord commanded him to curse me. Shimei couldn't help himself. He was literally a prophet of God, sent to curse David. Isn't that an amazing thought? He said, the Lord has commanded him. How many Christians would have considered Shimei's attack to be a satanic attack? Yeah. The devil's doing this, right? Christians would have been praying and rebuking and binding and loosing and everything Christians do. This has got to be the devil, right? It's got to be the devil. But David heard God, and David knew that God said. Because nothing happens except by the Lord allows it. Jesus said God has to allow. David knew that it was God sending Shimei. And why did he send him? To humble David. We always think that we've been crushed about as crushed as we can be. And then comes the steamroller. Right? I can't get any flatter than this. I'm already flat Stanley. And then God sends Shimei to humble him. Why? Because David knew that there's no victory without a season of humility. You will never experience victories without seasons of humility. Never. Seasons of humility are the price you pay for victory. If David had allowed Abishai to kill Shimei, David would have never regained the kingdom. God told me this. He would have never regained the kingdom from Absalom. Shimei stood between David and his kingdom. Let him curse me, be humbled, and return my kingdom to me, or kill him, defend myself, and throw everything away. That is an amazing thought. That is a brilliant thought from God. Remember, when God singles you out to be persecuted, it's always the pound of flesh that you will pay in order to receive promotion. But the only stipulation for receiving is humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. And then he will promote, exalt, and lift you up. Amen.
Amen.
Stand.
Thank you.